Members voted. Have all members voted? The clerk will lock the machine and announce the vote.
113 yeas, 1 nay, Madam Speaker.
Show the bill passes. Read the next bill.
By Representative Fabricio and others, House Bill 317, a bill to be entitled, an act relating to complaints against law enforcement and correctional officers.
Representative Fabricio, you are recognized to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Bill 317 strengthens due process protections for law enforcement and correctional officers. It requires that all complaints be in writing and signed under oath, preventing anonymous accusation when a police officer is being interrogated. Officers must receive a copy of the complaint and supporting evidence before any interrogation or disciplinary action. Additionally, if an investigation results in no discipline, it cannot be included in the officer's personnel file or used to deny promotions or commendations. Madam Speaker, that is the bill.
Are there questions of the sponsor? Representative Gottlieb, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative, what I want to know is, can we stop the clock? Because I can't see.
Members, can you clear the aisles? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative, here's my question. If an individual officer receives a complaint, the complaint is substantiated, but there's no discipline, what are the guardrails in the bill that if that officer decides to switch departments, the next department is going to find out about that bad conduct that was substantiated but not disciplined?
You are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The bill requires that before the interrogation occur, that the name of the complainant be provided to the police officer. That is the crux of the bill. The purpose for that is so that the same standard be applied for police officer that would be applied to you, Representative Gottlieb, or myself, or any other elected official.
Representative Bracy Davis, you are recognized.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Representative, can you clarify whether this bill is intended to apply retroactively to past complaints and investigations already included in the officer's personnel file, or will it only apply prospectively to new complaints filed after the bill's effective date?
Representative Fabricio, you're recognized.
There is no retroactive language in the bill.
Representative Bracy Davis, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So last session, civilian review boards lost their authority to review officer misconduct. Now this bill removes investigative files from the personnel records, even when complaints are substantiated but not disciplined. With both public and internal oversight stripped away, how are agencies supposed to identify patterns of misconduct before they escalate?
Representative Fabricio, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That sounds like debate, but I'll respond to it regardless. Generally, the bill is very simple. It requires simply that when a police officer is going to be confronted with an investigation, that the name of the person who filed that complaint be provided to him. That's simply it. Thank you very much.
Representative Gant, you are recognized.
Thank you. Rep. Fabricio, could this bill create accountability problems for law enforcement agencies themselves by forcing them to make personnel decisions with incomplete records because past complaints are erased or withheld from review?
Representative Fabricio, you're recognized.
I don't believe so, no.
Representative Nixon, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Rep. Fabricio, what data do you have showing that false complaints against officers are a widespread problem, warranting this level of procedural barrier?
Representative Fabricio, you are recognized.
This bill was brought to me by the men and women of the Fraternal Order of Police, and they ardently requested that we consider this bill in favor of the men in blue that respond to police calls.
Representative Regner, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Rep. Fabricio, what's the policy justification for ignoring the professional judgment of Florida's top law enforcement leaders, inclusive of the Florida Sheriff's Association and the Florida Police Chiefs Association, who believe this bill weakens internal accountability?
Representative Fabricio, you are recognized.
Thank you so much. So I've spoken to police chiefs in my community that aren't necessarily part of a lobbying organization. And I'm aware that the lobbying organization brought that to you. But I've actually spoken to real police chiefs and sheriffs who are in my community who support this bill. Thank you.
Representative Hart, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Does requiring sworn complaints under penalty of perjury paired with criminal penalties for false statements, do you think that this could chill the First Amendment protected speech to address grievances within their governments?
Representative Fabricio, you're recognized.
Great question, and I appreciate you bringing the Constitution because I believe this bill strengthens the Sixth Amendment, which requires that people who are accused of something be able to confront their accuser.
Representative Joseph, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. How will disciplinary action be defined across agencies when determining what qualifies for record keeping in a personnel file?
Representative Fabricio, you're recognized.
Agencies will be able to develop rules based on the statute once it's passed.
Representative Joseph, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could inconsistent interpretations by various agencies, which you've just explained would have their own rulemaking authority, lead to unequal application of the law?
Representative Fabricio, you're recognized.
I don't believe so, but courts are created under the Constitution to resolve those issues if they do occur. But what I'll add to this, because I get it, you're reading questions that somebody provided you, but what I'll suggest is that this policy has been implemented throughout the state of Florida in various agencies already. It's been implemented in Texas and other states, and it seems to be working fine.
Representative Driscoll, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. How will agencies identify patterns of behavior or escalating misconduct if complaints that don't result in formal discipline are excluded from an officer's file?
Representative Fabricio, you're recognized.
This bill doesn't address the fact and the reality that there is an internal affairs organization that is totally separate and apart from this employment file.
Representative Driscoll, you are recognized.
Could we talk about how this bill aligns with accountability measures if officers are shielded from investigations based solely on procedural technicalities, like the absence of a sworn complaint, even when there's credible evidence?
Representative Fabricio, you're recognized.
Would you mind rephrasing that question? I'm not sure what you're asking.
Representative Driscoll, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm curious because there could be disciplinary action, right? Or there could be an investigation. Why would we effectively erase that investigation solely on procedural technicalities, like if there's not a sworn complaint?
You're recognized.
I'm not sure if I agree with the premise of your question that we're erasing anything.
Representative Gottlieb, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Representative Fabricio, let me direct the answer that you just gave to lines 90 to 93. The investigative file of an investigation of law enforcement or correctional officer which does not result in any disciplinary action to the officer may not be included in the personnel file of such officer. So if a complaint is substantiated, but there's no disciplinary action taken, why can that not be included in the officer's file?
You are recognized, Representative Fabricio.
Give me an example of a situation where a complaint would be substantiated, but no disciplinary action would be taken.
You're recognized, Representative Gottlieb.
That's outside the bill, and I reject the premise of your answer. The bill specifically states the investigative file of an investigation of a law enforcement or correctional officer which does not result in disciplinary action. So it's not saying is unsubstantiated. The bill allows for a substantiated complaint that doesn't have disciplinary action to not show up in somebody's file. Why?
Representative Fabricio, you're recognized.
I don't necessarily agree with the premise of your question.
Representative Gant, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you. Madam Speaker. So, in regards to accreditation, we heard in committee testimony from sheriff's organizations that the ability for anonymous complaints to the agency is tied to accreditation. How do you reconcile national accreditation standards with the language in your bill that restricts anonymous complaints? How do we make sure that our agencies remain accredited on a national level?
Representative Fabricio, you're recognized.
Like I mentioned before, this policy has already been implemented in some agencies throughout the state of Florida, and it's been implemented in agencies in Texas.
Representative Rayner, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Rep. Fabricio, kind of along the same lines of Representative Gant's questions, if we allow officers who may have known patterns of misconduct to pass through law enforcement agencies and they almost pass through undetected, how do we prevent Florida and other agencies really from becoming magnets for officers who have bad conduct?
Representative Fabricio, you're recognized.
Representative Rayner, I would ask you, in cases involving confrontation clause issues, where there is no declarant that can be brought forth in the case to present testimony against the accused, what happens in those cases?
Time having expired on questions, are there any amendments?
None on the desk, Madam Speaker.
Show the bill rolled over for third reading. Representative Fabricio, you're recognized for a motion.
Madam Speaker, I move that the rules be waived and HB 317 be read a third time by title and placed for final passage.
Representative Fabricio moves that the rules be waived and HB 317 be read a third time by title and placed on final passage. All in favor say yay. Opposed, no. Show the motion adopted. Read the bill a third time by title.
By Representative Fabricio and others, House Bill 317, a bill to be entitled, an act relating to complaints against law enforcement and correctional officers.
Are there any amendments?
None on the desk, Madam Speaker.
Members, we are going into structured debate on House Bill 317. The debate will be limited to 10 minutes per side in 10-minute increments. Total debate time not to exceed 20 minutes. Representative Gottlieb, you are recognized to begin the debate, and the clerk will start the debate clock.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Chambliss.
Representative Chambliss, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. One of the things that we definitely need to do a lot better job of is establishing trust between community and law enforcement. This bill goes in the complete opposite direction of that. One of my concerns, and I didn't get a chance to speak to you about it, was I'm wondering, does this also stop law enforcement officers from being willing to speak against other law enforcement officers? Does it stop regular community citizens from being willing to speak up? Because law enforcement officers are the armed guardians of a community. If they are not able to speak anonymously, they will be in fear of retaliation. I mean, there's a reason why that's in place, and there should be an expected understanding that if the people who walk around with the guns know that I'm speaking up, that I might want to shut up. And so in order to move to a better place between community and law enforcement officers, I encourage everyone to vote down on this bill because this is not the way to do it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Gottlieb, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Campbell.
Representative Campbell, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, we want our communities to trust law enforcement and for our officers to be treated fairly. That's why I rise in opposition of this bill. I want to strengthen the integrity of the profession and support the officers who live up to its highest ideals. This bill may seem straightforward, requiring complaints against officers to be submitted in writing, signed under oath, but when you look closer, it's clear that this bill builds walls around misconduct and discourages good officers, community members from speaking up. Under this bill, no officer can be investigated unless they receive a copy of signed, sworn complaint. That sounds reasonable until you remember how rare it is for whistleblowers, whether civilians or fellow officers, to feel safe enough to speak on the record, especially when it's about someone within their own department. Just imagine what legitimate but not anonymous complaint can do in a rural county where everyone knows each other. It's scary. We all know that there's blue walls of silence. This bill reinforces it. Most officers are professionals serving with our courage and integrity. They want to be bad actors, but this bill protects those who bring the shame to the badge. Let's support our good policing and honest officers, and let's support the public's right to be heard without putting them or their careers at risk. Vote down on this bill.
Representative Gottlieb, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Bracy Davis.
Representative Bracy Davis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I rise today not in opposition to law enforcement, but in defense of accountability. Not because I distrust the badge, but because I respect the people. And House Bill 317, under the guise of reform, takes us dangerously backwards. This bill would require complaints against law enforcement or correctional officers to be written and signed under oath, eliminating the option to file anonymously and exposing people to retaliation. Let me be clear. False accusations are serious, but so is unchecked power. This bill doesn't protect justice, it protects silence. Last year, we passed the HALO bill, limiting the public's ability to film officers. We dismantled civilian review boards, putting accountability in the hands of those meant to be held accountable. And now HB 317 tells us that officers can't be held accountable unless victims risk their safety to report. Even law enforcement leadership is saying no. The Florida Police Chiefs Association and the Sheriff's Association both oppose this bill. This should tell us something. I don't just legislate for Tallahassee. I legislate through the lens of my district, a district representing all people, inclusive of Black, brown, and yes, blue lives. And let me be clear, I back the blue wholeheartedly, but I also back the Black and the brown. Not all officers are bad, but bad officers do exist. And when we protect them, we corrode public trust. You can't tell communities to trust the system while making the system inaccessible. You can't stand for public safety and then pass policies that make the public less safe. Because if we truly care about making Florida safer, we will hold everyone accountable, including those who wear the badge. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Gottlieb, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Gant.
Representative Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, thank you, Rep. Bracy Davis. I ditto on everything she said. And I want to also add another layer. As a criminal defense attorney, we get a personnel profile of all the officers that are involved in cases that we are investigating. So while the bill sponsor kept bringing up the Constitution, we have to remember this is not anything that's in court. This is an agency and an administrative process. So the Constitution doesn't go out of the window, but it is not accurate or even appropriate to apply the Sixth Amendment to arguments or questions in response to this bill. I'll further state that Representative Gottlieb asked several questions regarding the disciplinary actions. There are sustained and unsustained investigations when police officers receive complaints. All of those investigations go into the personnel file so that as defense attorneys, and we love the Constitution and we believe in the Constitution, and the Constitution says we have the right to defend ourselves, and the right to counsel, and counsel is adequately prepared in order to defend the case as per the Constitution with a complete file. This has a chilling effect with people reporting. Rep. Campbell brought up a great point. In rural counties, we're not from a rural county, Rep. Fabricio, so that's kind of out of our purview. But there are rural counties in Florida where everyone knows everyone. And so it will have a chilling effect. Even though that might not happen in Miami-Dade County, we cannot exclude the rural counties where it's very much a reality. Lastly, I'll say, when the police chiefs and the Sheriff's Association, who are the leaders of our men and women in blue, come and they speak in opposition because this will make their jobs, which they do very effectively, harder, I'll listen to them. And it's funny that we care about the unions now when we didn't care about the unions when we passed anti-union bills last year. Thank you.
Representative Gottlieb, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Rayner.
Representative Rayner, you are recognized in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First off, I just want to also make sure the record is clear because it was intimated that I was lobbied on this bill. No, baby, I'm never lobbied on the bill. I actually read the bills and make a decision. So I just want to make sure it's very clear on that. First off, I have issues with this bill because the bill sponsor could not establish what the legitimate government interest in ensuring that a complaint against a law enforcement officer or a correctional officer is made anonymously. Another reason I have issues with this bill is that when Representative Gottlieb asked the actual question, which I think is the ultimate question, what guardrails exist in the bill to stop someone with a troubling history just shy of a formal discipline from bouncing from department to department? There was not an answer that I believe that was sufficiently given. We talked about the confrontation clause, but as my learned colleague just indicated, we're not talking about an actual court proceeding. We're talking about an administrative process. Also, I'm old enough to remember when we were here in this chamber that Leader Driscoll passed a bipartisan police reform bill off this floor that included accountability measures for law enforcement officers. And this bill seeks to strip some of those accountability measures, and that was bipartisan. So Republicans voted for it. Y'all voted for it, the front rows. That stripped the accountability measures for law enforcement officers. So there's a lot of reasons, but I'm going out of time and I'm running out of time. So I'm asking my colleagues to vote down on this bill.
Representative Gottlieb, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield the floor to Leader Driscoll.
Representative Driscoll, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Rep. Rayner, for reminding me of that bill. It was 2021. We came back after all of the protests. We came back after COVID, after the murder of George Floyd and too many Black unarmed individuals to name. And we as a chamber, united, said that we wanted to have accountability. We said that if there's an officer who has disciplinary action in their background, we want them to have to file an affidavit with their new employer so that bad officers can get passed on and passed on. And I think I understand the intention of this bill. It's trying to do something good, but I think in the sense that I think the bill sponsor is trying to do something good, I think the challenge, though, is that there are unintended consequences. And at a certain point, when unintended consequences are put before you squarely, you have to start asking then, does it become intentional? And I think that we need to be protecting the people of Florida, and I think that means upholding good law enforcement, backing them when we can, but also having the accountability that we need. And for that reason, I'll be down on the bill today. Thank you.
Time having expired, Representative Maggard, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I recognize D. Alvarez.
Representative Alvarez D., you are recognized in debate.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, at some point we have to make a decision whether we want people to volunteer to go into the breach or not. And when you say that you back them, do you or don't you? And the question will be, I back law enforcement when it's convenient. I back law enforcement when it gets me votes. I back law enforcement when I can get credit in front of my community. But when law enforcement asks you to back them, you say, yeah, but. In this case, you tell me the Florida police chiefs and the Florida sheriffs come out against it. But what you failed to mention is that the 25,000 members of the FOP that came in front of you, when you ignored that man and his request for you to protect him, you said, we're just making sure you're not a bad cop. At some point, you have to stop attacking the 99.8 and start supporting them. At some point, you have to realize that the rhetoric that is absolutely anti-cop in this chamber has to be checked by your desire to have a safe and secure society with an accountability process that exists today. Cops are one of the most regulated people you have ever seen. And if you don't believe that, go be one. Find out what it takes to turn around, put your name on the line, and then face an anonymous accusation that turns out to be unfounded, then that accusation carries with you the rest of your life, can be used against you in your promotions, and carries on you like a scarlet letter. All this bill says is, if you have a complaint about a cop, we want to hear it. I will say it till the day I die. Nobody hates bad cops more than good ones. You make their life miserable. But if you want to say a cop did something bad, put your name on it. If you can't put your name on it, then you violate the basic tenets that we created this country under. We don't allow criminality to come in here, right? We keep saying, oh, it's not constitutional, yet we cite constitutional phrases. How about basic rights of fairness? If I say you do something wrong, that will trigger for a cop an immense amount of administrative procedures that will carry on them forever, even if they are cleared. And then what we say is, if you lied about it, you get in trouble. And you don't want me to do that. You say if you lie about it and the cop did nothing wrong, you can just go on your way and go lie about it again. At this point, we say enough. We're standing for the blue, not for some of the blue. We stand for all of the blue. And that is that.
Representative Maggard, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield to Alvarez J.
Representative Alvarez J., you are recognized in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today as a parent of law enforcement officers. Rep. Fabricio, thank you so much for this bill. The more you read this bill, nowhere in this bill says that there cannot be a unanimous call and complaint on a police officer. The process is very simple. You make a complaint, you do it unanimously. God bless America for that. Investigation starts, the department takes it over, Internal Affairs starts the investigation. Of course, there's got to be a name of who made it, and who has it is Internal Affairs, so they can proceed with the investigation. If the officer is found guilty, he's a rotten apple. We need to move him out, like anyone in any field, anywhere in this country. But if the officer is found not guilty, that paperwork should be removed from his personnel file so it doesn't keep following him on his future promotions. But remember, Internal Affairs was involved in this case, and the file does not get erased from Internal Affairs. Internal Affairs keeps it, and if there's another complaint on this officer, it automatically, Internal Affairs brings the file back out. Even if the officer moves to a different department, the system and Internal Affairs has that file in there. So again, if we're going to support the blue, let's stand by the blue, because we all know that when we call that 911 for help, we want to make sure that they arrive in our home to protect us and take care of us. So, Representative Fabricio, as a father of law enforcement officer, I really appreciate what you're doing for our law enforcement officers, sir.
Representative Maggard, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield to Representative Blanco.
Representative Blanco, you are recognized in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, being a police officer isn't a career, it's a calling. These are people who kiss their kids goodbye when they leave to work, and their families with the unknown if they'll make it back home. And oftentimes, besides risking their life, they've got to risk everything on the possibility that someone might make a complaint, make a false accusation. People who are dealing with the very worst of our society are concerned about whether they're going to have a job tomorrow, or worse, be sent to jail. Folks, I think this is an absolutely incredible piece of legislation by Representative Fabricio. I've worked on police officers who have gotten hurt, and I've had police officers save my life in my line of work. It's easy to sit here in the comfort of these chairs and make decisions that affect the lives of the people who keep us safe. But we owe it to the men and women who risk their lives every day, who have our backs, that today we stand united and have theirs. This is what they deserve, this is what they've earned, and this is what they will continue to get every day. And that is the message we must provide them as they watch from a position of hope, a position that someone truly has their back. And I ask you to vote in favor of this amazing bill. Thank you.
Representative Maggard, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We waive the rest of our time in total.
Having time been waived, Representative Fabricio, you are recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is the Back the Blue bill. If you back the men and women who support you, who answer the 911 calls, vote up on this bill. With that, I close.
Members, the question now recurs on final passage of HB 317. The clerk will unlock the machine and the members will proceed to vote. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? The clerk will lock the machine and announce the vote.
93 yeas, 16 nays, Madam Speaker.
Show the bill passes. Read the next bill.
By Civil Justice and Claims Subcommittee, Representative Lopez J. and Representative Woodson.